People from ethnic minority backgrounds are said to be losing out in the jobs market, according to a report published today. Experts say barriers like single parenting and low skills are holding members of some communities back. Let's bring in Adeyemi, who's from the think tank, the Fabian Society, joins us from central London, as you see. Adi, a very good morning to you. Of the findings that have been uncovered by this particular study, the regional variations are quite noteworthy and striking.
Yes, it's regional. And we also know that from the report and from other reports that it's also across occupational types, and even within ethnic groups there's a great disparity. So Bangladeshi women might suffer more than those from a Chinese ethnic minority. But yes, it's regional. It's across different ethnic minorities as well, and it's really worrying. But it's also glad that we've got data and hard evidence to highlight what I know from my own experiences and anecdotally from family and friends, that there is a growing problem for young ethnic minorities in the job market.
Let's just have a think about those two things you identified there. On the regional point, I mean, why is it that, for instance, figures, say, in the northeast of England are much worse than around the Glasgow area, for instance?
Well, I think we know that the north and south divide has been something that's been ongoing for a while in this country, and it's heightened even more when you add ethnic minority into that intersectional mix, even more so if you add gender into that as well. I think the Chancellor has been addressing that with kind of the Great North push and the strategy there. But I think the problem's heightened because the government has a one-size-fits-all blanket approach to this, whereas perhaps we should be working more with local enterprise groups in different communities to address the nuances in the different areas rather than just a one-size-fits-all strategy.
It's particularly interesting, though, when you think about the northeast, because when you think about the northeast, one thing that we know is that the number of public sector jobs there is proportionately very high, isn't it? You'd expect the public sector might be better in this area.
You would expect so. You would expect that the public sector would reflect the public. And I think it's therefore incumbent on the government to intervene a little bit more. I think over the course of the last number of years and decades we've seen a number of initiatives to address this, but certainly, like you just say, the public sector should reflect the public, and so perhaps there should be more targeted approaches in the northeast, for example. In parts of London we know that there are ideas for that. For example, one of my colleagues, Sadiq, is thinking of ideas to address that rather than just a one-size-fits-all approach. But yes, the government perhaps should think of interventionist policies to make sure the public sector does reflect the public.
Let's just go into that second point you made, Adi. I mean, the point that the British, the black and ethnic minority groups are not monolithic. That there are gaps within there, aren't there? So you cite the example of Bangladeshi women doing a lot worse than, you know, groups from elsewhere, China, India. There are interstices there which need to be unpicked.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I can't speak for all ethnic minorities, but in my work and the things I do, I've come across a wide ream of different ethnic minority groups. And like you just say, yes, there are different nuances. We know that white gypsy, Irish traveller communities suffer a lot as well. And what disappoints me, what upsets me, is that there's no sophistication from government that we've seen of late to address this, to say actually this group is different from another group. And I know it's convenient to have BME as a catch-all term for ethnic minority groups, but actually we would think that the government is a little bit more sophisticated to say this society, this group is different from this group in society, this region in the northeast is different from another region in the south. And so we should have different policies, different approaches to tackle that. This report from the Resolution Foundation, other reports from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, for example, highlight this time and time again. And it would be disappointing if we have another hard evidence report to show the damaging effects it can have, and if the government does nothing about it. I'm expecting really strong responses, and not just you know, sound bites, but really strong responses from the government on this now.
In terms of the the substantive response that you're talking about, I mean, is positive discrimination the answer? I mean, it has its critics, doesn't it? There are people who say, look, you know, if I'm not from that particular community, I want to be sure that my children get the best possible attempt at getting a job. The stoked resentment is the argument against it.
Sure, that's a really good point, because we want a cohesive society. I think positive discrimination, fully taking that theoretical approach on board, might not be the best approach long term, but we definitely need to think about the approaches that we do make. We need to identify and acknowledge that not every group in society has the same opportunities. The report shows that they have lower pay, the more barriers to work, and even higher rates of employment. And so if we don't have some positive approaches to say and recognise that actually the opportunities and the chances that different ethnic groups have are different to their white majority contemporaries, then we're just going to be storing up problems. We're going to have the same problems year and year again. So positive discrimination in its entirety, perhaps not, but at least recognising that something positive needs to be done with this group, something rather than just resting on our laurels or saying actually we have a catch-all strategy for them, but positively intervening and trying to address the imbalances, I think is the right approach. We've done it with carrier bags, for example. We now have 5p tax on carrier bags to positively move society's behaviour in a direction. We have it in other realms of society. So again, we know that there's something wrong with a section of our society. Government needs to positively think about it, positively do something to address that.
Adebusuyi Adeyemi from the Fabian Society, really appreciate you coming in this Bank Holiday Monday morning. Thanks a lot.